Saving the queen nearly cost me everything, but she didn't leave me. The morning air was cool and crisp, carrying a quiet sense of calm over the grand palace grounds. Sunlight fell gently on the gardens, making the fountains sparkle and the flowers bloom in brilliant colors. For most people, it was just another beautiful morning, but for the young man who walked briskly along the marble corridors, it was the start of a day that would change his life forever. He adjusted the lapel of his simple uniform and took a deep breath. Though he had worked here for years, the weight of responsibility never felt lighter. Every movement mattered, every decision counted, especially when the life of the queen, the most respected person in the kingdom, was involved. He had seen her many times over the years, not as a distant figure behind curtains or high walls, but in moments that revealed her humanity, her kindness, her patience, and the way she listened to everyone with a genuine heart. To him, she was not just the queen. She was a symbol of hope and warmth. Her smile had a way of calming the busiest halls, and her laughter could reach even the most tired guards, lifting their spirits. That morning, as he passed through the grand hall lined with golden chandeliers, he noticed the queen herself standing near a window, gazing at the gardens. Her hands rested lightly on the railing, and her eyes seemed distant, lost in thought. He paused for a moment, just watching her, and he felt a familiar sense of admiration and worry. He knew that today would be important, though he could not yet name the reason. There was a tension in the air that he could feel in his bones, subtle but persistent. The queen turned slightly, sensing his presence. She smiled, the kind of smile that seemed effortless but carried quiet authority. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft but commanding. He bowed slightly and replied with the respect that had been ingrained in him since his first day here.
"The day began like any other."
The young man moved through his duties with precision, checking schedules, coordinating with other staff, and ensuring that everything was in place for the events planned later. Though he appeared calm on the outside, he felt a growing unease. Something seemed different today. Perhaps it was the way the guards were speaking in hushed tones, their eyes darting toward the entrances. Perhaps it was the small package that had arrived unexpectedly at the palace gates. Or perhaps it was just his intuition telling him that peace is often the calmest before a storm. By midday, the queen was preparing to leave for a small public ceremony. The crowd would be modest, but it would be an opportunity for people to see their monarch up close. As the young man walked beside her, ensuring her safety, he noticed a few unusual faces among the attendees. People who seemed too attentive, too focused, and slightly out of place. He felt the tension rising in his chest, but he pushed it down, reminding himself to stay alert and professional. The queen, meanwhile, spoke to the citizens with her usual grace, laughing at the children's jokes and nodding kindly to the elderly who had come to see her. Even in the midst of smiles and applause, the young man's eyes never stopped scanning the surroundings. Every movement, every shadow, every unusual glance registered in his mind. And then, just as the queen was about to step onto the stage for a short speech, he noticed it. A figure in the crowd whose gaze did not meet the queen's, but lingered sharply on her, eyes cold and focused. There was something about that presence that felt dangerous, a quiet threat that could erupt at any moment. He felt his heart beat faster. But he did not panic. Years of training, years of serving had taught him that fear could not show. He subtly shifted closer to the queen, ensuring he was in a position to act if needed. She spoke to the audience, unaware of the danger, and he could see the trust in her face. She trusted him to protect her, though she did not know how close danger might be. The ceremony continued, each moment stretching longer as the unusual figure moved slightly, blending with the crowd, but never losing focus. The young man's instinct screamed at him to act, but he held his position. A wrong move could cause panic, could ruin the moment, could endanger the queen. He remained vigilant, every sense sharpened, every muscle tense. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the queen finished her speech and began to walk toward the exit, her steps elegant and calm. The young man mirrored her movements, eyes still on the crowd. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Every person in the crowd seemed harmless, but one could never underestimate a determined threat. His thoughts raced as he considered every possibility, every scenario, every step he would need to take if the unexpected happened. And then, just as she reached the last few steps before stepping into the open courtyard, the figure moved suddenly.
The motion was quick, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to set off every alarm in the young man's mind.
Without thinking, he acted. He positioned himself closer to the queen, subtly guiding her to the side, just in time to avoid what could have been disaster. The crowd barely noticed, but the young man's heart pounded in his chest. The queen, sensing something unusual, turned slightly toward him. Her eyes met his, and there was a flicker of understanding. She did not ask, did not question, but the gratitude was clear. It was in the way her shoulders relaxed slightly, the way her hand lightly touched his arm, as a small gesture of reassurance. In that moment, he felt a bond, a quiet acknowledgement that trust had been shared in a wordless exchange. The rest of the ceremony passed without incident, but the tension did not leave him. He remained vigilant, escorting the queen back to the palace, aware that the danger had not fully disappeared. The courtyards and halls felt different now, filled with possibilities he could not ignore. Yet in her presence he found a strange calm. The queen moved with confidence, unaware of the narrow escape, and he felt a sense of pride mixed with relief. After the ceremony, as they walked through the private gardens toward the palace, the young man allowed himself a moment to breathe. The sunlight danced on the leaves, birds sang softly in the trees, and the fountains sparkled like diamonds. It was a perfect morning, yet he knew the day had changed. Nothing would ever feel completely ordinary again. The queen paused at a fountain, looking down at the water, lost in thought. The young man stayed a few steps back, respecting her space but ready to act if needed. She glanced at him and smiled, the kind of smile that could melt tension and fear. "Thank you," she said softly, though she did not explain why. He simply nodded, knowing that some words were unnecessary. Trust and loyalty were often expressed through actions, not speech. As the sun climbed higher, the palace staff moved quietly around them, attending to their duties. The young man walked beside the queen, alert and focused, yet aware of the delicate balance between danger and peace. He knew that the world was unpredictable, that threats could appear at any moment, and that his role was to be prepared, always. But he also knew that courage was not just about action, it was about presence, awareness, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. By the time they reached the inner halls of the palace, the young man's mind was already planning for the hours ahead. He would check the security measures, review the schedules, and remain vigilant. The day was far from over, and he could feel that challenges were yet to come. But for now, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he had protected someone who trusted him completely, someone who represented more than just power, a person who inspired hope and respect.
The queen, entering her private chambers, gave him a final glance and a small nod.
In that simple gesture, there was understanding, reassurance, and connection. The young man felt a surge of determination. Whatever dangers the day might hold, he would face them. Whatever risks might come, he would not falter. And as he turned to leave, ready to continue his duties, he could not shake the feeling that today would test him in ways he had never imagined. Outside the window, the gardens remained serene. The fountains continued to sparkle, and the sunlight painted everything with a golden glow. But beneath that calm surface, the young man knew, lay the beginning of a challenge that could change everything. And though he did not yet know the full extent of what awaited, he felt ready. After all, protecting the Queen was not just a duty. It was a responsibility he would carry with every fiber of his being, no matter the cost.
The day seemed calm at first, but beneath the surface, tension was building.
The young man had barely caught his breath from the morning's unusual events when new responsibilities demanded his attention. The Queen was scheduled to attend a charity event at the palace's outer hall, where citizens and officials would gather. Crowds were expected, and even though the event was planned for goodwill and celebration, the young man could not shake the unease that lingered from the earlier incident. Something about the way the unusual figure had moved through the crowd still haunted him. He reviewed the security measures carefully, checking every entrance, every corridor, every access point. Guards moved with precision around the palace grounds, yet he knew that even the most vigilant team could never predict every outcome. His mind raced through possibilities. What if someone tried to approach the Queen unexpectedly? What if a simple distraction turned into danger? Every scenario was carefully considered, every precaution reinforced. When the Queen appeared, dressed in a soft blue gown that shimmered in the sunlight, the young man felt that same mixture of admiration and protective instinct. She smiled at him warmly, unaware of the thoughts running through his mind. "Are we ready?" she asked, her voice calm and composed. He nodded, indicating that everything had been checked.
"Yes, Your Majesty."
Everything is in place. As they moved through the crowd, the young man's senses sharpened.
He noticed every detail. The way the people shifted in the hall, the way some whispered to each other, the unusual stillness in certain corners.
His eyes scanned for anything out of place, any movement that seemed calculated.
He had trained for moments like this, but he also knew that real danger was never predictable. The Queen paused to speak with a young child, bending down with grace to meet their eyes. The young man moved slightly closer, standing beside her to ensure no one could approach too quickly. The child laughed, handing the Queen a small drawing of the palace. She accepted it with delight, praising the artwork and giving the child a gentle pat on the shoulder. The moment was heartwarming, but the young man remained alert, his instincts constantly guiding him. Suddenly, he noticed a shadow in the corner of the hall, a figure that moved with purpose, yet tried to blend in with the crowd. He felt a cold rush of anxiety. This was no ordinary guest. The figure's focus was not on the event, not on the Queen's speech, but directly on her. The young man adjusted his position, subtly moving closer to the Queen, while keeping his eyes on the approaching threat. The Queen began to address the audience, her voice steady and confident.
She spoke of hope, unity, and the importance of caring for one another.
The audience responded with polite applause, but the young man barely registered the sound. His attention was fixed on the figures slowly making their way toward the stage, eyes never leaving the Queen. He considered his options carefully. Any sudden movement could cause panic, could draw attention to the figure, or worse, alert them to his awareness. He stayed calm, keeping his posture neutral while preparing to act if necessary. Time seemed to slow as the figure drew closer, each step deliberate and measured. The young man's mind raced through every possible scenario, every possible reaction. And then, in a flash, the figure reached the edge of the crowd and made a sudden move. The young man reacted instinctively. He stepped forward, subtly shifting the Queen's path just enough to avoid the potential danger. The motion was smooth, practiced, and almost invisible, but it was enough to protect her, without alarming the crowd. The Queen sensed the slight movement and glanced at him. Their eyes met, and in that brief exchange, she understood. No words were spoken, but the trust between them deepened. She gave him a small nod, acknowledging the silent reassurance. In that moment, the young man felt a surge of determination. He would do everything to protect her, no matter the risk. The rest of the event continued without incident, though the young man's heart raced. He remained close to the queen, his senses still alert, ready to respond at a moment's notice. The audience applauded, but he barely noticed, his focus entirely on her safety. Each smile, each wave to the crowd was a reminder of the responsibility he carried. After the ceremony, the queen walked through the gardens with him, away from the public eye. The sun cast long shadows over the pathways, and the fountains shimmered in the afternoon light. For a moment, it seemed as though the world had returned to calm, but the young man knew better. Danger could appear at any time, in any form. His instincts would never allow him to relax completely. As they approached a secluded part of the garden, the unusual figure reappeared. This time, the movement was faster, more deliberate. The young man felt a surge of adrenaline. He stepped closer to the queen, placing himself between her and the potential threat. His mind raced through every possible action, every step that could protect her. Suddenly, the figure lunged forward, not with violence, but with a sudden attempt to get close. The young man acted immediately, positioning himself to shield the queen and guide her away. His movements were precise, his actions calculated, ensuring that she remained safe while avoiding alarm. The crowd nearby remained unaware, focused on the fountains and flowers, oblivious to the quiet danger unfolding just steps away. The queen's eyes widened slightly, but she remained composed. Her trust in him was evident, and he felt a deep sense of responsibility. He had trained for years, but nothing compared to the reality of protecting someone so important, someone who trusted him completely. Every instinct, every decision, every movement mattered. After the immediate threat had passed, the young man guided the queen back toward the palace. His heart still raced, and his hands trembled slightly with adrenaline, but he maintained a calm exterior. The queen walked beside him, her presence steadying him in ways words could not express. She did not speak of the danger, did not question his actions. Her quiet confidence was a reassurance that he needed, a reminder that his efforts had not gone unnoticed. Inside the palace, the young man checked the security measures again. Every entrance, every corridor, every hallway was secured, yet he knew that vigilance could never be relaxed completely.
He reviewed the day's events in his mind, noting every detail, every movement, every unusual behavior.
The queen's safety was his responsibility, and he would not allow anything to compromise it. As the afternoon progressed, the young man allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The queen had praised the children earlier, had smiled at the citizens, had moved through the crowd with grace and confidence. And through it all, he had been there, unseen yet essential, guiding her away from potential danger. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but it was also an honor. He had protected someone who represented hope, kindness, and leadership. He had ensured that the queen remained safe, and that was a feeling unlike any other. Even in the quiet moments as the palace staff moved around preparing for the evening, the young man remained alert. He walked beside the queen, ready to respond, ready to act. His mind never stopped analyzing, never stopped anticipating, never stopped planning. He knew that danger could appear in the most unexpected forms, and he would be ready. As evening approached, the queen retired to her private chambers. She gave the young man a small smile and a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the day's events. No words were needed. Trust and loyalty were communicated through action, through presence, through commitment. The young man bowed slightly and retreated, knowing that his duty was far from over. Later that night, he sat in his quarters, reflecting on the day. The thrill of adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a quiet exhaustion. Yet even in that fatigue, he felt a sense of pride.
He had acted without hesitation, without doubt, and had protected someone who relied on him completely. The events of the day had tested his courage, his instincts, and his resolve.
He knew that challenges would continue to come, that danger could appear again at any time. But he also knew that he would face them, because loyalty and courage were not choices. They were a way of life. As he closed his eyes for a brief rest, the young man could still see the queen's smile, hear the soft laughter of the children, feel the calm presence that guided him through every moment. The day had been filled with tension, with subtle threats, with moments that could have changed everything, but it had also been filled with trust, with connection, and with the quiet knowledge that he had fulfilled his duty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and perhaps new dangers. But for tonight, he allowed himself a small measure of satisfaction. He had acted when it mattered most. He had protected the queen. And in doing so, he had proven to himself that courage, loyalty, and vigilance were not just ideals. They were realities, lived every day, in every choice, in every action. The day after the unexpected threat, the palace felt different. The morning sun shone brightly over the gardens, but the young man could not shake the heaviness in his chest. The events of the previous day had left their mark, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Though the queen remained calm and graceful as always, the young man felt the weight of scrutiny pressing down on him. Whispers floated through the halls, questions that did not need to be asked aloud, and eyes that lingered a little too long. He moved through his duties with careful precision, but he sensed the subtle tension among the staff. Some colleagues looked at him with curiosity, others with quiet admiration, but a few seemed skeptical, even disapproving. He knew that bravery was often misunderstood, and that those who acted in moments of crisis could be judged for their choices, even if the outcome had been positive. He reminded himself that his responsibility was not to seek approval, but to protect, and yet the awareness of judgment lingered like a shadow. The queen had requested a private audience with him that morning. He approached her chambers, feeling a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Though she had smiled at him after the events, this was the first time she had asked to speak alone. He bowed slightly as he entered, his heart beating steadily, but with a quiet tension. "Sit," the queen said softly, her eyes meeting his with a calm but serious gaze. The room was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the palace beyond the walls. "You did well yesterday," she began, her voice measured. "You acted with care and without hesitation. The stage. I noticed. Everyone else may not, but I did." The young man felt a rush of relief, but he kept his composure. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I only did what I was trained to do. It was my responsibility." The queen leaned back slightly, studying him. "Responsibility is more than duty. It is about choices, and you made the right ones, even when the outcome was uncertain. I want you to know that I trust you." Completely. Those words, simple yet profound, struck him deeply. It was not just gratitude. It was acknowledgement. The kind that gave meaning to every decision, every alert movement, every moment spent anticipating danger. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I am honored, Your Majesty." As he left the private chambers, he felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. Though the queen's words were reassuring, he knew that the world outside those walls was not as forgiving. Rumors had already begun to circulate, and subtle criticisms were whispered in corners. Some questioned his judgment, suggesting that he had acted too boldly. Others speculated about what might have happened if he had failed. Though their words were polite, they carried weight, and he could feel the tension pressing against him with each passing hour. Despite the scrutiny, he continued his duties with unwavering focus. He checked security, observed the palace grounds, and coordinated with the staff, ensuring that every precaution was reinforced. His mind moved constantly, anticipating every scenario, preparing for every possibility. The memory of the figure who had threatened the queen lingered in his thoughts, a reminder that vigilance could never be relaxed. Evenings at the palace were usually calm, but that night brought little relief. As he walked through the quiet halls, he could sense the echoes of judgment and speculation. He paused near a window, looking out at the gardens where the fountains reflected the soft moonlight. The serenity of the scene contrasted sharply with the storm in his mind. He had acted bravely, yet he felt isolated, misunderstood, and uncertain. It was in that moment of quiet reflection that he received a message from the Queen. She requested that he accompany her for a brief walk in the private gardens. He moved quickly, heart pounding, yet careful to maintain composure. When he arrived, he found her waiting by a fountain, her expression calm but thoughtful. "You do not need to speak of what happened yesterday," she said, her voice soft. "But I want you to know that your actions did not go unnoticed. People may judge, question, or misunderstand, but I saw everything, and I am grateful."
The young man bowed slightly, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. "Your Majesty, I only did what I believed was right."
The Queen smiled faintly, her gaze steady.
And that is why you are here, because you act with conviction, not for recognition or praise.
Remember that even when others doubt you. Those words resonated deeply within him. It was more than reassurance. It was a reminder that true courage was not about public applause, but about quiet commitment, about integrity, about protecting what mattered even when the world did not notice. Over the following days, the young man faced challenges beyond the immediate threat. He encountered questions from senior staff, subtle critiques from peers, and the ever-present pressure of living up to expectations. Yet, through it all, he held fast to the Queen's words, drawing strength from her quiet confidence in him. Each time he felt doubt creeping in, he recalled her gaze, her acknowledgement, her trust. It gave him focus, resilience, and determination. One afternoon, a meeting was called to review security procedures. The young man attended, aware that the events of the previous day would be discussed. He listened carefully as senior staff debated protocols, questioned decisions, and reviewed contingency plans. Some voices were critical, suggesting that caution had been too slow, that the response could have been better. Others spoke in support, emphasizing the importance of readiness and foresight. When it was his turn to speak, he remained calm, explaining his decisions, the reasoning behind each movement, and the actions he had taken to protect the Queen. He described the approach of the figure, the subtle threats, and the careful measures he had employed to ensure safety. His words were precise, measured, and professional. Afterward, there was a pause in the room. Some nodded in acknowledgement, others exchanged thoughtful glances. The young man did not seek approval, but he could feel the weight of judgment slowly lifting. His actions had been understood, at least by some, and his integrity remained intact. That evening, the Queen once again reached out. She requested a private meeting, this time not just to acknowledge his actions, but to ensure he was not burdened by the pressures surrounding him. He entered her chambers, finding her seated gracefully by the window. The soft light of the setting sun painted the room in warm tones, creating a peaceful atmosphere. "You carry more than your duty," she said softly.
You carry the expectations of others, their doubts, and their judgments. But remember, the measure of your worth is not found in their opinions, but in your own choices.
The young man listened intently, feeling the weight of her words. It was rare for anyone to speak so directly about the pressures he felt, and rarer still for someone of her status to offer such understanding.
"Your Majesty, I only want to protect you, and to do what is right," he replied quietly.
The Queen smiled, a faint, knowing smile. "And that is exactly why I trust you. You act not for recognition, but for responsibility. You have shown courage, loyalty, and integrity, and that is worth more than praise." Her words, simple yet profound, filled him with a quiet sense of reassurance. He realized that the true measure of courage was not in the absence of fear, but in the willingness to act despite it. It was about integrity, vigilance, and the quiet determination to do what was right. And in that moment, he understood that the Queen's trust was both a gift and a responsibility, a reminder that his actions mattered, even if they went unseen by the world. The following days were filled with careful routines. The young man monitored the palace grounds, ensured the safety of the Queen, and continued to manage the subtle challenges of his role. Yet, amidst the duties, he felt a growing bond of trust and understanding with the Queen. Her quiet support, her recognition of his efforts, and her steadfast presence created a foundation of confidence that he had never experienced before. One afternoon, as they walked through the palace gardens together, the young man noticed the Queen pause to admire a new flower blooming near the fountain. She turned to him with a gentle smile.
"You do not speak much about yourself," she said, "but I want you to know that your dedication has not gone unnoticed."
"You carry a heavy responsibility, and yet you bear it with strength." He bowed slightly, feeling a deep sense of humility. "Your Majesty, it is my duty and my honor," he replied. She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Remember, even when others doubt you, when the world questions your actions, I do not. You have shown not just bravery, but integrity, and that is something rare and valuable." Her words lingered in his mind long after their walk ended. They were not merely compliments, they were a validation of his choices, a reassurance that his actions had meaning beyond immediate outcomes. For the first time, he felt that his courage and dedication were understood, appreciated, and respected. The palace continued its rhythm of duties and events. Yet the young man's awareness remained heightened. He knew that challenges would arise again, that threats could appear unexpectedly, and that his vigilance must never waver. But the weight of scrutiny and doubt which had once pressed heavily upon him now felt lighter. The Queen's quiet support and recognition had provided a foundation of confidence, a sense of purpose that could not be shaken. And so, as the sun set over the palace, casting golden light over the gardens and halls, the young man reflected on the days that had passed. He had faced danger, scrutiny, and doubt, yet he had remained steadfast. He had protected the Queen, acted with integrity, and maintained vigilance in the face of uncertainty. And through it all, he had discovered a profound truth. Courage is not measured by recognition, but by quiet commitment, loyalty, and the willingness to act when it matters most. The evening air was cool and still, and as he walked through the halls toward his quarters, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Queen's words echoed in his mind, a reminder that his efforts mattered, even when unseen. He had faced challenges and emerged stronger, more focused, and more determined than ever. And he knew that, whatever trials lay ahead, he would meet them with the same steadfast courage and unwavering loyalty that had guided him through the days past. The palace was quiet that morning, bathed in soft sunlight that filtered through the grand windows. For the young man, the day felt heavier than usual, not with fear or tension, but with anticipation. After the recent events, the Queen had requested a special meeting, not just to discuss her schedule or the palace routines, but to acknowledge what had happened and ensure that he was recognized for his actions. He dressed carefully, keeping his uniform neat and his posture straight. Though he did not seek attention, he understood the importance of these moments. Recognition was not about pride or reward. It was about acknowledgement of loyalty, courage, and duty. As he made his way through the palace corridors, he passed by staff members who offered polite nods or curious glances. Whispers still lingered in the air, but today felt different. Today, there was respect beneath the murmurs. The Queen's chambers were warm, softly lit, with sunlight streaming across the polished floors.
He stood near a window, looking out at the gardens.
her expression calm but focused.
When she saw him enter, she gestured for him to sit, and he did so respectfully, keeping his gaze forward, yet attentive.
"You have done well," the queen said, her voice steady and gentle.
Your actions over the past days have not only protected me, but reminded everyone here of the meaning of dedication and courage.
It is time that people understand the importance of your efforts.
The young man felt a deep warmth in his chest, though he remained composed.
Your Majesty, I only acted as I believed was right.
I did not think of recognition or reward. The queen smiled faintly, and that is exactly why your actions hold such value. Courage is not about seeking praise. It is about protecting others, standing firm when faced with uncertainty, and remaining true to one's responsibilities. You have done all of this quietly, without expectation, and that is rare indeed. She motioned toward a small table where a few envelopes and documents were laid out. Today, the council and the palace officials will formally acknowledge your dedication. There will be recognition, yes, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. I trust you completely, and I want you to understand how valued you are, not for duty alone, but for your integrity and loyalty. The young man felt a lump rise in his throat. Words could not fully express the relief and gratitude he felt. He had acted with care, bravery, and commitment, yet the past days had been challenging. Scrutiny, judgment, and doubt had weighed heavily on him. But now, in the presence of the queen, he felt a sense of peace. Your Majesty, your trust means more than any recognition. I am honored to serve. She studied him for a moment, as if ensuring her message had reached deep within. Remember, your role is not just about protection, it is about understanding, anticipation, and presence. You do not need to prove yourself to anyone, because the truth of your actions speaks for itself. And today, the truth will be seen. Later that day, the council convened in the main hall of the palace. The young man entered quietly, standing with composure as the queen addressed the assembly. Her words were measured, full of grace, yet carried the weight of authority. She spoke of loyalty, courage, and integrity, highlighting the importance of vigilance and responsibility. When she turned to the young man, her gaze met his, steady and full of appreciation. Let it be known, she said clearly, that the actions taken to ensure safety and peace were carried out with dedication, wisdom, and bravery. The individual responsible has demonstrated not only skill but integrity that inspires all of us. We owe them our gratitude, and it is time that it is recognized publicly. The assembly responded with respectful applause. Some staff members who had doubted him in the past now looked on with admiration. Colleagues who had whispered behind closed doors now nodded, their expressions sincere. Even those who had questioned his decisions now seemed to understand that true courage was not loud or boastful. It was deliberate, thoughtful, and unwavering. After the formal acknowledgement, the young man found himself walking beside the queen once more, this time through the palace gardens that shimmered with afternoon light. The fountains sparkled, and the flowers swayed gently in the breeze. It was peaceful, almost surreal, yet beneath the calm, he could still feel the echo of responsibility. You handled everything with care? The queen said softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Not many could have acted as you did, and yet you did so quietly without expectation. That is why I trust you, and why I am proud to have you by my side. He glanced at her, feeling a mixture of humility and pride. Your Majesty, it has been my honor. I only hope I can continue to serve with the same dedication.
You will, she replied.
Because loyalty and courage are not one-time acts. They are choices made every day, in moments seen and unseen. You have proven that you are capable of both, and that is something no one can take from you.
In the days that followed, life in the palace returned to a rhythm of normalcy.
The young man continued his duties with careful attention, but there was a sense of renewed confidence in his steps. The acknowledgement had not changed who he was, nor had it lessened the responsibility he felt. But it had given him reassurance that his efforts mattered. His vigilance remained sharp, his instincts keen, and his dedication unwavering. The Queen, meanwhile, maintained her quiet support. She offered subtle gestures of gratitude, a nod, a smile, a private word of encouragement. These small moments carried immense meaning, reminding the young man that true trust and recognition often went beyond public acknowledgement. It was in these moments, in the quiet exchanges, that loyalty and courage were truly valued. One afternoon, as they walked through the private gardens together, the young man noticed how the sunlight caught the Queen's hair, casting a golden glow. She paused, looking at the fountains, her expression thoughtful. "You do not often speak of yourself," she said gently, "but I want you to know that your dedication, your vigilance, and your care have not gone unnoticed. You carry a heavy responsibility, yet you do so with grace." He bowed slightly, feeling a quiet warmth in his chest. "Your Majesty, it is not recognition I seek. It is only my duty and my honor to serve." The Queen's gaze softened. "And that is exactly why you are valued. You act with conviction, without expectation, and that is rare. The world may judge, question, or misunderstand, but I see the truth of your actions. That truth will guide you, always." As evening fell, the palace lights began to glow, reflecting softly off the marble floors. The young man stood quietly, watching the gardens from a window, reflecting on the journey of the past days. He had faced uncertainty, scrutiny, and challenges, yet he had remained steadfast. He had protected the Queen, acted with integrity, and maintained vigilance. And through it all, he had discovered that courage was not about recognition, but about quiet commitment, loyalty, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. The Queen appeared beside him, her presence steadying him as always. She spoke softly, almost as if sharing a personal thought. "You have done more than duty requires. You have shown courage, loyalty, and integrity, and I will not forget it. Your actions matter, not just to me, but to all who witness the truth behind them."
He felt a surge of gratitude, though he kept his voice calm.
"Your Majesty, your trust and acknowledgement mean more than words can express. I only hope to continue serving with the same dedication." She smiled faintly, a smile that conveyed understanding, respect, and quiet reassurance.
You will, and know that whatever challenges lie ahead, you are not alone.
"I stand with those who show courage and loyalty, and that includes you." In the days that followed, the palace moved forward with a renewed sense of purpose. The young man continued to carry out his duties with precision and care. But now there was a quiet confidence in his steps, the acknowledgement of his actions. The trust and respect of the Queen had provided a foundation of strength that would carry him through whatever lay ahead. Even in the quiet moments when he walked the palace halls alone or observed the gardens from a window, he felt a sense of fulfillment. He had faced danger, uncertainty, and scrutiny, and had emerged not just unbroken, but strengthened. He had protected the Queen, acted with integrity, and proven to himself that courage and loyalty were not abstract ideals. They were lived every day, in every action, in every choice. And in the final moments of the day, as the sun set behind the palace towers, casting long shadows over the gardens, the young man stood quietly in the hall, reflecting on all that had transpired. He had faced challenges that tested his courage, his judgment, and his resolve. He had endured scrutiny, judgment, and uncertainty. Yet through it all, he had remained steadfast, loyal, and vigilant. The Queen's trust and acknowledgement had illuminated the meaning of his actions. It was not about recognition or reward, but about quiet dedication, integrity, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. And as he looked toward the future, he knew that whatever challenges came, he would meet them with the same unwavering courage and loyalty that had carried him through the days past. For in the end, it was not the applause of the crowd, nor the whispers of the staff, that mattered. It was the trust, respect, and quiet bond between him and the Queen, a bond forged in moments of uncertainty, strengthened by courage, and honored by loyalty. And that bond, he realized, was worth everything.